Hello, the Pioneer viewers. We continue to bring you the developments regarding the Russia-Ukraine war. We also mentioned in our previous map reports, we stated that we would report the developments on the Kherson front line. In recent days, the problems of the Russian army have been growing. In particular, Russian sources often express the effects of the tactical advantage of the Ukrainian armed forces on the Kherson front line. Russian sources express these and criticize the Russian war leadership in harsh terms. So much so that some sources even call for the resignation of the Russian war leadership. In recent days, we have seen an increase in calls for both resignation and end to the war. But what extent are these calls being answered? Of course, we cannot expect the Russian leadership to respond to these calls. So what are the latest events of the Kherson front line? What is happening in the Russian troops? Let's take a look at the developments together. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so as not to miss the daily map reports and agenda reports of the Pioneer team. Also, I continue to follow your comments. Last time, I responded to your comments about artificial intelligence by saying that I am not artificial intelligence. However, I still see our users commenting that I'm artificial intelligence. Let's say it again. Artificial intelligence has not yet developed at a level to report as good as me. Now, if you're ready, let's begin the Pioneer Report. As you know, the Ukrainian army has been under intense pressure on the Kherson front line in recent days. This pressure has worn out the Russian troops. Ukrainian artillery attacks have been going on for a long time. The breaches created by artillery attacks allow the Ukrainian army to advance. There is even such a situation. Armored vehicles of the Ukrainian army also started to take part in the areas where the clashes intensified. This situation increases the pressure on the Russian army even more. According to the reports that we have received in recent days, long-range Ukrainian artillery is hitting Russian positions. In this region, there are commanders of the Russian army in charge of the Dnipro and the Kherson front line. In fact, the Russian commander named Topelsky was also assigned here, and there were highly speculative news about him. However, according to the Russian sources, no news has been received from any Russian commander in the region, including Topelsky, in recent days. Russian sources expressed this situation as follows. The situation in the area near the Kremlin settlement remains tense. The Ukrainian armed forces are concentrating their heavy equipment on the bank of the Dnieper River. Electronic warfare continues to cover the positions. The enemy is superior to us in the terms of electronic warfare systems. Despite all the warnings, the combat leadership still does not provide support to our troops. In addition, artillery units of the Ukrainian armed forces are actively working at night with 120mm mortars. Reconnaissance units are also on the ground. They carry out hit-and-run attacks. Since the beginning of the month, we have expecting a meeting with the commander of the Dnipro group to discuss urgent problems, including communication and sudden issues. However, so far the meeting has been postponed. At the latest date, the commander could not be reached. This is a very worrying situation for the balance of the Russian army. The commanders cannot be given directive from the outside, and at the same time, Russian commanders cannot report on the latest situation on the front line. This reveals that the Ukrainian pressure in the region is more intense than known. In such a situation, we can say that it is quite natural that there will be a great demoralization in the Russian troops. There is also the issue of the electronic warfare systems expressed by the Russian sources. Electronic warfare systems may also be a reason for the lack of contact with the Russian commanders. As you know, different equipment was used in many wars in the history of the world. With the discovery of ground power and the invention of the firearms, weapons technology evolved to a new dimension. Today, according to the statements of the Russian sources, the Russian army has lost its technological superiority. There is also this possibility here. Ukrainian troops may have blocked access to the front line through electronic warfare systems. In other words, the inability to reach the commander may be due to this reason. For whatever reason, not being able to reach the Russian commander is a great weakness for the Russian army. This is an event that has potential to affect the entire front line. We think that the events of this scale will be more common in the coming days. If the Ukrainian army can apply the strategies applied on the Kherson front line to other points of the front line, a great tactical superiority will be in the hands of the Ukrainian army. However, as I mentioned, the Ukrainian army needs to apply the same strategies on the entire front line. It is true that things are not going as the Russian army would like on the Kherson front line, but is there any good news for the Russian army at other points on the front line? Of course not. I have also mentioned in our map reports that the Ukrainian army has a very strong defense line in Avdiivka and the Donetsk front line. Some sources even describe Avdiivka as the second Bakhmut. The clashes in the region are quite fierce. Local sources report that hundreds of Russian soldiers are destroyed every day. From this point of view, it seems that Avdiivka could really be the second Bakhmut. In the past days, they shared quite remarkable images with the public. As you know, the Russian army's strategy in Avdiivka is called the meat attack. A group of completely discarded soldiers are sent to the Ukrainian line without artillery support. The common characteristic of these soldiers is that they are either inexperienced or penalized. We know that the Storm Z troops are usually deployed here. In addition, inexperienced Russian soldiers are also used in the meat attacks and thrown as the bait in front of the Ukrainian army. Here, the images shared by the Ukrainian sources show a moment where the Russian soldiers carried out a meat attack. The images in question were published by the 58th Brigade serving in the Ukrainian army. In the footage, it is seen that the Russian soldiers mobilized at dawn and launched a meat attack on the Ukrainian positions on the eastern approaches of Avdiivka. These attacks are always expected by the Ukrainian army because Ukrainian forces could not be worn down by the Russian army in the region. This is an obvious fact. There are no heavy artillery attacks on the positions of the Ukrainian army. Russian artillery units are quite inadequate in this region. Russian sources have often stated this. It would not even be wrong to say that the Russian war leadership are using Russian soldiers in the region as cannon fodder. The Ukrainian defense which the Russian troops encountered after the meat attack was quite strong. These attacks failed against the Ukrainian defense and were defeated. Therefore, they retreated. However, we see that this withdrawal was not controlled. This clearly shows us how inexperienced the Russian soldiers in the region are. We see that recent losses of the Russian army are increasing. According to the latest data, the losses of the Russian army are as follows: 312,550 military personnel, 5,354 tanks, 322 combat aircraft, 344 helicopters, 5,634 unmanned aerial vehicles, 10,079 armored personnel vehicles, 1,561 cruise missiles, 7,569 missile system, 22 warship, 1 submarine, 881 MLRS, 9,949 vehicles and fuel tanks, 580 air defense systems, and 1,079 special equipment. So what do you think? How do you think the crisis in the Russian army will end? How do you assess the Ukrainian advance on the Kherson front line? What do you think about the latest situation in Avdiivka? Let me know in the comments. I read and care about all your comments.